Skinwalker Ranch owner Brandon Fugal finally addressed the moment that nearly ended the investigation for good. In a rare, unscripted statement, he admitted there was a point during excavation beneath the Mesa when the team encountered something so unnatural, so reactive, that he immediately ordered the dig to stop. According to Fugal, the discovery posed unpredictable consequences and should have never been disturbed. Camera feeds were cut, thermal data confiscated, and the area sealed. Subscribe for the full breakdown, because what he just revealed changes everything. For months, the team at Skinwalker Ranch monitored unexplained interference patterns beneath the southern edge of the Mesa, patterns that didn't match naturally occurring geological movement or standard electromagnetic fluctuation. The sensors, buried across multiple depth points, began registering rhythmic pulses at precise intervals, almost like something cycling or responding from below. At first, it was shrugged off as instrumentation error. But when multiple systems, thermal, seismic, and radar, recorded the same frequencies simultaneously, attention shifted. Brandon Fugal initially resisted excavation. Despite being the owner and main financial backer, he repeatedly warned that disturbing soil at locations with active anomalies had historically resulted in escalation, referencing earlier incidents when drilling triggered unexplained mechanical failures and skyborne activity. Pressure to investigate mounted after an unmarked low-pressure point was detected below the Mesa that showed no geological reason for existing. The team believed there could be an underground structure, potentially artificial, buried, and undisturbed. Fugal hesitated, but approved the pre-excavation radar survey under strict environmental containment protocol. When ground-penetrating radar returned an image, angular, with seemingly straight-lined contours, debate erupted. Phil Torres argued it could be a chamber or collapsed facility. Technical staff believed it might be natural stratification, but the most unsettling point came from an acoustics consultant who noted the returned echo profile aligned more with open density, as if something hollow existed beneath them. Several advisors suggested pausing. A Ute tribal liaison quietly recommended avoiding that specific area, recounting generational warnings tied to that stretch of the Mesa, stating, "The ground remembers what's placed in it." Fugal considered canceling, but after multiple failed attempts to explain the readings conventionally, he reluctantly authorized Stage 1 soil removal under daylight supervision only. The first dig was shallow, controlled, minor, and monitored live. Nothing unusual occurred, but as depth increased past the first meter, the anomaly reacted differently. Equipment stability dropped sharply, sensors failed to recalibrate, and the pulse pattern intensified. From that moment, the team believed they might not just be uncovering something, but possibly interacting with it. And as they moved deeper into the earth, reactions intensified. The moment the ground shifted was coming, and no one was ready. The excavation entered its second stage at 10:03 a.m., under strict control and supervised by both geological and technical personnel. With the initial meter cleared, everything appeared stable. Instrumentation still flickered occasionally, but no obvious environmental hazards emerged. A light wind moved through the canyon. Crew members later noted that it felt deceptively calm, as if the location was waiting. As the excavator dug past the 2-meter depth, however, the sensors, previously pulsing at irregular intervals, suddenly began registering at exact 10.6-second cycles, active across multiple platforms simultaneously. This forced the team to pause and recalibrate. The calibration failed. Drone reconnaissance was deployed next, but both drones experienced unexpected downward thrust, even with stable weather readings. Flight logs showed artificial interference manipulating altitude controls. The machines struggled to ascend more than 10 feet above the dig site. Engineers assumed electromagnetic disruption, but Phil Torres privately suggested something in the ground seemed to be pulling, as though resisting aerial observation. The digging resumed manually to avoid triggering automated system reactions. By late afternoon, the exposed area revealed discolored soil compressed into distinct layers, unnaturally flat, not consistent with natural sedimentation. A geologist pointed out faint trace elements of compounds that should not exist at that depth unless introduced almost artificially. The moment that raised the most concern came when a contractor accidentally placed his gloved hand against the soil deposit. He reported feeling a low-frequency vibration in his sternum, like a heartbeat inside rock. He removed his hand instantly and claimed his chest felt tight for several minutes. Data collected from localized ground sensors at that exact moment registered a 0.2 microtremor. Despite no seismic activity recorded within 200 miles, Phil requested deeper core sampling to understand what lay beneath the newly exposed strata. Fugal hesitated, but approved the test given the emerging significance. As the core drill advanced, air pressure around the site began dropping. For 17 seconds, sound meters detected a compression wave moving outward from the shaft. Yet, no wind occurred. The crew started hearing faint, rhythmic thumps, felt through their boots, not heard through the air. One technician later wrote it felt like being above something, breathing. They kept digging. None of them understood that what they were encountering wasn't being uncovered. It was responding. And within hours, the first truly alarming shift would take place. Because when night fell over the mesa, the ground itself began to move. Dig operations had ceased for the evening at precisely 6:48 p.m. While surface-level conditions remained outwardly stable, multiple team members had filed quiet concerns about prolonged internal unease. The monitoring posts were left active overnight per Fugal's request, collecting ambient seismic, thermal, and radio frequency data. Just before midnight, the first alert triggered automatically on the remote surveillance terminal. What registered initially appeared as a microquake, but the pulse signature did not match geological behavior. It was too symmetrical. Data compared against ambient wave patterns suggested directional energy pulsing from below, not lateral displacement typical of seismic motion. Phil was the first to return to the dig site, arriving with a field technician. The air was unnaturally still. Visual observation showed no shifts on the surface, but when logging sonar returned, what they saw was described as subsurface volumetric fluctuation, a slow uplift followed by a subtle release, spaced exactly 11 seconds apart, as if the Earth itself were exhaling and inhaling. Jessica arrived moments later and noted the ground felt slightly warm, despite temperature drops at night. Instrument readings showed a localized heat difference of 4.2 degrees, confined to a 21-foot radius directly around the excavation pit. The team activated ground microphones to isolate the source of the pulses. What came through was unlike anything logged on previous investigations. Instead of chaotic interference or audio warping, the signal was uniform, repetitive, like coded vibration. A field acoustic analyst later noted it resembled resonance intended to stabilize mass, not disperse it. Moments later, one of the stabilization sensors collapsed inward, falling into the hole despite being securely staked outside the cut line. Equipment readings began failing. Battery life dropped at accelerated speed, signal loss cascaded across receivers, and core drill telemetry spiked at 400% activity, despite being inactive. Phil radioed Fugal directly, advising temporary suspension and evacuation. According to internal report snippets, before issuing his directive, Fugal asked one question: is the ground rising? The next reading answered for them. The soil within the pit swelled upward approximately 1.3 centimeters without external pressure. Movement was slow but undeniable. A technician watching the live thermal overlay gasped, claiming he saw a pattern forming along the lifted earth, something repeating the same frequency signature logged earlier. Then alarms triggered simultaneously across all monitors. The ground didn't just shift again, it reacted. And when the team replayed the footage from this moment, Fugal made the decision that changed the entire course of the excavation. During the incident, the primary live cameras failed exactly as expected once the anomaly spiked, but an auxiliary security feed stored on an off-network recorder kept running. It wasn't part of the official telemetry grid and only existed as a backup, intended for visual asset security. Hours later, when the crew reviewed the footage, nobody expected to see anything beyond static. What they found instead became the most alarming piece of visual evidence ever recorded at Skinwalker Ranch. At 11:53 p.m., As the soil rose and then slowly settled, the camera captured a distortion forming just beneath the excavation rig. It appeared as a faint compression ripple, followed by a sudden pull inward, like mass was consolidating in a localized pocket. Infrared overlay, for a split second, registered a human-sized void occupying the exact center of the pit. But unlike regular temperature anomalies, this one showed no heat signature, no reflection, and no surface disruption. It appeared, stabilized momentarily, and then sank deeper, as if aware of observation. Slow-motion audio sync revealed a harmonic tone that flickered precisely when the distortion appeared. One analyst said the anomaly looked like something under the soil was testing the surface tension, not breaking through, just applying pressure. When replayed with contrast enhancement, it appeared that faint branching cracks formed cyclically in the dirt, not random patterned, suggesting controlled stress. That's when Brandon Fugal, watching remotely, uttered the words later repeated in confidentiality. "Shut it down! We should have never dug there." The excavation officially ended in that moment, but the ground did not stop reacting. The moment the auxiliary feed was replayed and the anomaly's behavior confirmed, Brandon Fugal arrived at the control hub unannounced. Witnesses describe him as unusually calm but visibly tense, watching the footage on silent loop. After a prolonged pause, he requested the final seismic overlay. When the technician zoomed in on the subsurface displacement model, Fugal reportedly whispered, "It's zeroed in on the excavation point." Moments later, localized vibration returned, this time increasing in frequency, mirroring the exact timestamp where the technician earlier reported chest pressure. The crew noted that the readings didn't resemble geological activity at all. Instead, they displayed progression, targeted movement shifting lower into the shaft. At 12:07 a.m., he issued the official order. "Seal it immediately. No more cutting. No more testing. We shouldn't have dug there." Those words froze the room. Production halted. Excavators were withdrawn. Within minutes, the site became restricted, and the crew was repositioned outside the containment zone. Engineers attempted to document residual sensor output, but the readings began fluctuating independently, even with all equipment disconnected. Battery packs dropping to zero, core sampling rigs warming unexpectedly, and minor electromagnetic pulses clustering around the excavation rim despite zero incoming power. One contractor reported that the soil reshaped slightly again, this time not upward, but compressing toward the perimeter, like the ground trying to reset itself. He refused to continue work and later filed for removal from the project. Fugal personally instructed that the dig zone be filled and sealed with reinforced mineral packing, not standard soil. He demanded that no personnel re-enter the site until further notice and insisted that data logs skip automated cloud backup to prevent off-site distribution. In post-brief discussion, his stance shifted from curiosity to containment. "Whatever is beneath this mesa," he said, "it wasn't meant to be disturbed, and it knew when we tried." What he didn't expect was that the anomaly would continue reacting even after being buried. After the dig site was sealed and equipment disconnected, the crew expected activity to cease immediately. Instead, sensors that were supposed to be offline began transmitting residual readings without any recorded power source. Autologging captured a sequence of faint but consistent fluctuations in the newly packed material, as if something beneath it was still adjusting. At 1:14 a.m., nearly an hour after shutdown, the remote seismic monitor registered directional movement, not toward the excavation pit, but away from it. Slow, measured, deliberate, heading northeast along the underground gradient. Phil Torres, still on site analyzing live feeds, noticed that the movement aligned exactly with the path where the crew stood during their final minutes at the pit. Heat void signatures ran parallel to footprints captured earlier that afternoon. Forensic technicians later confirmed a 0.8-degree drop in temperature within those exact coordinates, like something was tracing the path back. One analyst noted the pattern mimicked human pacing. What alarmed the team wasn't the shift itself. It was what happened when they reviewed thermal scans from the moments after sealing. The mass didn't just move beneath the earth. It elevated slightly, creating a spectral impression hugging the underside of topsoil. It followed where people had stood, pausing for seconds at points where crew members reported anxiety earlier in the investigation. At 1:26 a.m., A ground microphone, left unintentionally active, captured a low, gliding frequency that corresponded directly with the seismic shift. It wasn't random. The pattern matched the timing of the technician's heartbeat from the collapse event hours earlier. That's when the medical lead advised temporary withdrawal, stating, "If this thing can align to someone's physiology, we may not be at risk from proximity, but from recognition." The crew cleared the zone completely by 1:40 a.m., but the scans continued recording movement beneath the mesa, and by morning, at least one team member would admit they didn't sleep, not because of what they saw, but because of what they felt might leave the ground next. By morning, the excavation site showed no visible disturbance. The seal packing appeared intact. No instruments triggered alarms. On the surface, it looked as if nothing had happened. But the change didn't come from beneath the mesa. It came from the people who'd been closest to it. Within hours, 3 crew members reported deep chest pressure, not pain, but a sensation described as like gravity pulling into my ribs. One technician said he could still feel the rhythmic pulses they'd detected underground, even though no monitors registered ongoing anomalies. Another admitted he avoided stepping anywhere near the dig site, despite no logical reason, stating bluntly, "It feels like standing over something that remembers you were here." During medical assessment, mild tremors were observed in 2 individuals when shown footage of the excavation area. Even without sound, their heart rates accelerated in perfect sync with the timestamp where ground displacement had been detected the night before. A visiting analyst confirmed that even reviewing still images triggered physiological responses consistent with anticipation stress. No one wanted to use the word fear, but more than one admitted to feeling recognized. Psychological observations documented recurring dreams reported by 2 crew members. Both described being beneath the soil, aware of moonlight above them but unable to reach the surface. One wrote privately that they woke believing they heard the ground breathing through me. Neither returned to the mesa that day. Brandon Fugal suspended all subterranean operations indefinitely, stating that future investigations would avoid direct intrusion of ground-level anomaly. He reportedly told senior staff, "Whatever was under us, interacting with it may have allowed it to interact with us." What he didn't disclose publicly was that the anomaly had not fully receded, and in the hours ahead, records would reveal it wasn't finished reacting. Earlier today, when pressed during a recorded interview about why excavation beneath the mesa was halted without public explanation, Brandon Fugal finally addressed the event directly. His response was brief but deliberate. He stated, "We began digging because we believed we were investigating something passive. What I realized too late was that we were interacting with something active." The room fell silent. He went on to explain that while the team expected geological feedback or possible industrial remnants, what appeared during the survey showed signs of conscious reaction. "It didn't behave like pressure release. It behaved like awareness," he added. When asked whether the team had disturbed something, Fugal paused before replying, "I believe we caused an environmental response that was not naturally occurring, and we should have never dug there." He emphasized the decision to cease operations was not made out of caution, but out of prevention. His final comments suggested deeper concern than logistical risk. Some discoveries should only be observed, not touched, because once you interact with them, they can interact back. The interviewer attempted to clarify if the phenomenon posed danger to the public. Fugal didn't answer directly. Instead, he said, "We sealed it because it reacted to attention. And if you air something like that, you amplify it." Seconds later, the network cut to a break. When cameras returned, no further questions about excavation were allowed. Following Fugal's statement, internal sources confirmed that the excavation site remains sealed under reinforced containment material, now monitored exclusively through remote sensors at carefully controlled intervals. No crew members are permitted to physically step onto the location without written authorization from both the medical supervisor and Fugal himself. Even then, conditions stipulate daylight-only presence and zero soil disturbance. Recent reports state that new anomalies continue to register intermittently. Subtle changes in ground density patterns, low-frequency audio traces, and occasional microfluctuations in thermal readings. None have escalated beyond initial thresholds, but analysts note that each event spikes when historical footage from the dig is reviewed in proximity to the Mesa. Production officials have quietly moved excavation operations to alternate areas with less sensor interference. Equipment originally used in the dig has been isolated in storage and flagged with a limited exposure protocol, meaning only designated personnel can access the machinery and only while monitored. 2 technicians who experienced post-digature symptoms are no longer active on the project and requested assignment removal, citing prolonged internal dissonance. While no official statement links these symptoms to the excavation, multiple internal memos acknowledge persistent effect markers. To date, there are no plans to resume digging at the site. Future investigations will rely solely on above-ground scanning and atmospheric tracking. In a closed meeting, Fugal reportedly said, "We didn't find something buried. We woke something that already knew we were here." When asked if he fears that whatever reacted underground might re-emerge, he responded, "It's still reacting. We're choosing not to provoke it further." For now, the site remains sealed. The ground is silent, but few believe it is still. And while no formal closure has been announced, those involved in the dig already understand the truth. They will never dig there again, not because they can't, but because they shouldn't. And the deeper question now isn't what's buried under Skinwalker Ranch. It's what might already be awake beneath it.